Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about 2022. 2022 was definitely an interesting year for entertainment. Not so much the industry, that was just one disastrous executive decision after another, but in terms of content, there was a lot of experimenting in familiar genres and franchises to try and freshen them up moving forward, at least from what I watched. Now, I will say that this was the toughest favorites list to put together for me so far because of what my viewing habits were this year. To be perfectly frank, most of my viewing time in 2022 was spent rewatching movies and shows for reviews, discovering and subsequently binging as much of the Great British Baking Show as humanly possible, and falling back into the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime, a hole I had crawled out of almost 20 years ago. Also, let me remind you, Nintendo released quite possibly two of the best Pokemon games ever this year. There are only so many hours in a day, and I have to keep my priorities straight. So I didn't have as much time and energy to dedicate to new stuff as I have in years past. But along the way, I did manage to consume some really great movies and shows that came out this year, and I'm going to share some of my favorites with you here, which you probably guessed that's why people make these lists. For anyone new, or anyone who just needs a refresher, just a quick rundown of how this is going to work. The only thing the entertainment in question has to do to qualify for the list is be released in 2022. Movies, new TV shows, or even new seasons of existing shows from previous years. And the standard disclaimer that this is obviously incredibly biased. I'm not saying these were the best pieces of entertainment from the year, most of them certainly are not. This is just the stuff I like the most and want to celebrate before moving on to focusing on 2023. So keep that in mind as we go along. With all that out of the way, let's count down my top 12 favorite pieces of entertainment from 2022. But why top 12? Because with this much great stuff out there, you really expect me to only pick 10? Let's start off with Number 12. Lost Ollie. This was a miniseries on Netflix that I feel flew under the radar, but one that I think would capture the hearts of anyone who watches it. It's a good example of what I was saying about original takes on familiar stories and genres. If you really enjoyed movies like Toy Story, The Brave Little Toaster, Homeward Bound, that kind of stuff, you need to watch Lost Ollie. It's one of those stories about a childhood friend, in this case an absolutely precious stuffed bunny named Ollie, played by Kristoff and King George himself, Jonathan Groff, trying to get back to his kid when he thinks he really needs him. Because it turns out, he really does. It's tough to really get into what makes the story so special, especially for this kind of story, without going into major spoilers, but even if you're able to figure out where it's going, watching it unfold is heartbreaking. But the moments where Ollie's optimism and innocence shine through despite those obstacles feels really good. It's got a really strong and unique cast of characters. The way the storylines between Ollie and his owner Billy play alongside each other are really well put together and edited, especially as they get closer and closer to hopefully reuniting, and every development in the story is stronger than the last. Even when they dedicate half an episode to another character's backstory, it's really well done and doesn't feel like a diversion. What started out as a familiar, almost nostalgic journey with an adorable star leading the way, turned into one of the most emotionally powerful stories I saw this year, about coping with loss and keeping the innocent and lovely things you can close. If you haven't already, please check out Lost Ollie. But just a heads up, bring tissues. You're gonna need them. Number 11. Glass Onion. I love detective stories. I know, you'd never get that from my content or having a conversation with me. So I, of course, was very fond of the new breakout detective Benoit Blanc in the 2019 film Knives Out. It had been a while since we had a new, fresh detective on the scene, and Daniel Craig really filled that void with his knowing deductions and southern drawl. When I finished Knives Out, my first thought was, man, I hope they make more movies with Blanc on the case. And just as 2022 was wrapping up, I got my wish. Glass Onion has a lot of the same stuff that made Knives Out entertaining to me. An Agatha Christie-style ensemble cast of eccentric aristocratic characters, a put-upon female character at the center of it all who gets to show them all up, a gripping mystery that is laid out so well that you think you know where it's going until you don't, and Daniel Craig just doing his thing in all of his foghorn leghorn glory.
You must be really great at clue hunting.
I'm very bad at dumb things. My Achilles heel.
Oh, I could watch this forever. Believe me, there is a good amount to say about this movie, especially with its parody and commentary on the pompous tech billionaire that gets depressingly more relevant with every passing day. But to go too deep into that would be going into major spoiler territory, and the last thing you want to do to a mystery is give away the ending. Glass Onion just has a lot of things that are really appealing to me, particularly in this genre, and prove the sustainability of the Blanc mystery franchise. Yeah, I'm not calling it a Knives Out mystery like Netflix did. They should have realized a good thing when they had it and market these movies around Blanc. I do hope this is only the beginning, but I also hope they shake up the formula a bit going forward. This movie does play out in a similar way to Knives Out, and I don't want people to start calling these movies predictable. But if they keep making these movies for as long as Daniel Craig will do them, I'll be right here to watch all of these mysteries unfold. Number 10. The Outfit. I feel like every year I come across a smaller film that I absolutely adore, that no one talks about, but there's so much other stuff that I'm excited about that it never makes my favorites list. Well, congratulate The Outfit for making it through this time. I cannot believe there isn't more buzz around this movie. It's so good. The Outfit is set in a small tailor shop that happens to be used often by the local mafia as a drop-off point. One night, this arrangement turns into a life or death conflict that keeps escalating over the rest of the film. This is the kind of movie that is right up my alley. It's almost like a play. It all takes place in this single location where the writing and performances carry the entire thing. You can feel the tension in every twitch of someone's body or thought running through their head, knowing that if someone makes a wrong move, people die. And it might be someone you care about. As much as I love my genre-heavy media with its fantastical worlds and creative concepts, I really admire a work that can make things just as engaging, if not more so, with just the basic tools of storytelling. The direction is magnificent, the production value made this one setting feel so alive, the fact that Mark Rylance isn't getting any awards recognition for his leading performance might be one of the biggest snubs of the year, and the best part? It's under 2 hours. It asks for just the right amount of your time, and then lets you get on with your day. Even at number 10, this was one of my favorite movies I watched this year. If this sounds like it would be up your alley, I highly recommend tracking it down and giving it a watch. You won't be sorry. Number 9. His Dark Materials, Season 3. The Season 2 finale of His Dark Materials devastated me. It was Ba Sing Se. It was Empire Strikes Back. It was Infinity War. As a result, I was clinging to news on when the confirmed Season 3 would be coming out. After a very long wait, it finally did just a few weeks ago. I understand if you didn't know that, because not only did HBO, in Warner Discovery's continued wisdom, decide to barely advertise it, but they did that thing where they aired 2 episodes a week for the entire season. The tried and true sign that a network has stopped caring about a show and wants to rush it out the door. While it wasn't the happily ever after ending I was secretly hoping for, I've come to learn that His Dark Materials is not that kind of story, it was still a very strong conclusion to this adaptation that introduced me to this magnificent world, realizing abstract concepts and new areas of this universe in visually striking ways. The combined effort of HBO and Bad Wolf Productions delivered an epic experience for this final season. There's also a lot of time diving into the relationships, or lack thereof, between all the characters they've created through this adventure, and resolving those matters in a way that really made me emotional at points. Aside from Daphne Keane and Amira Wilson, who continue to carry this show spectacularly no matter what is required of them, a highlight of the season is James McAvoy getting to play yet another unhinged genius with a god complex. This is like the only role I've ever seen him play. Has McAvoy been typecast and I just never noticed? Personally, I do think the season is a bit more exposition heavy than the others, but by the looks of it, the Amber Spyglass is a more dense book than the others, so I guess that was bound to happen. The final season of His Dark Materials was bittersweet in all the right ways, driving home the ongoing theme in His Dark Materials that even when something seems predestined and unchangeable, it'll be our own choices and actions that decide if that is really so. Despite the lackluster send-off by its distributor, I am very grateful to how this adaptation told this incredible story and brought its characters to life to introduce me to them. And it won't stop me from hoping that one day they'll adapt some of the other stories Philip Pullman has written in this universe. Maybe a small miniseries retelling Once Upon a Time in the North? Huh? Just a thought. Number 8. Every everything, everywhere, all at once. We all know the big trend right now is multiverses. Everyone has noticed this, and even I have joked about it several times in videos over the past year or so. But something that I think we take for granted is how easy it is to tap this well. A lot of these stories center around long-running franchises with a large history to fall back on, or well-established characters to mold into alternate versions. So what happens when you want to tell a multiverse story, but have to completely build it from the ground up? Well, on paper, you should get an incoherent disaster, but if you get a strong enough team behind it, you get everything, everywhere, all at once. It's no wonder this movie has taken off as much as it has. It has a lot of the dressing of big budget franchises with elaborate action scenes and creative visuals, but it has to work extra hard to stand out from the noise of the story trend while having none of the safety nets of its kin, and does it almost effortlessly. From the fact that the lead character is an everyday Asian woman in her 50s, to how inventive they are at bringing their concept of the multiverse to life. It does lead to imagery and fighting methods that are a little too surreal and off-kilter for my taste, and I did find those moments off-putting, but it manages to reel itself back into the story it wants to tell before it gets too lost in its own madness. As creative and elaborate as it is, Everything Everywhere All at Once has a healthy beating heart at the core of its sometimes bizarre setting. A tale about how differently our lives would go if the smallest of things had changed, from the point of view of a woman who has supposedly wasted all those opportunities to be remarkable, that is ultimately about how those small choices and connections make us feel a little less small in a gigantic universe of possibilities only lightly explored in our lifetimes, really resonates as the movie reaches its end. By the time I finish Everything Everywhere All at Once, I totally got why it captured the hearts and minds of film enthusiasts in 2022. While there were sequences that were a little too weird for me to put it in my rewatch queue as often as some other movies on this list, I greatly admire the production, performances, and overall passion behind this movie. Even if it's building off of the kind of story everyone wants to tell right now, it's the kind of creativity that should be encouraged in Hollywood more often. Number 7. Spirited. Tell me, dear viewers, do you ever stumble across a movie trailer and hope with all of your heart that it's good, even when there's a very good chance it's not going to be? When I first heard about Spirited, I wanted it to be good so bad. At first glance, it looked like a great time, especially in a year that seemed to be lacking in movie musicals, at least compared to last year. But the more I looked into it, the more I got concerned. I wasn't sure if the leads could handle carrying a musical. The director hadn't really worked on anything that was appealing to me, and as much as I am a Pastic and Paul apologist, they can be a coin toss. But luckily, Spirited was not only good, it was great. And it was great to me for one simple reason. It had a good idea, had some interesting ways of playing with it, and saw that potential all the way through to the end. Telling a Christmas Carol story through the eyes of one of the ghosts is pretty cute, and if they had just kept doing that, it'd be fine. But then there's a twist at the halfway point. I won't say what it is, but when I saw it, I thought to myself, alright, this could be great if they build on this twist in the right way. And man, did they ever. It's also just a great musical. This might be the best Pascal and Paul soundtrack I've heard. The songs fit the situations perfectly, be they comedic or emotional. Sean Anders did a fabulous job directing this too, especially during the songs. If he was signed on to direct another musical someday, I'd be totally on board with that. And the choreography, oh my god. Between this and Schmigadoon, Apple TV gets the best musical ensembles. It's unreal how good it is. Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell also do a fantastic job carrying this movie through its story, humorous moments, and many musical numbers. Neither of them are Broadway caliber by any stretch, but they hold their own really well and work exceptionally well together. These are more demanding roles for the two than you might think, but they really rose to the occasion. Every few years, heck every year practically, we get a handful of adaptations of A Christmas Carol, saying that they are going to reinvent the classic story. Spirited actually succeeds in that, updating the story's themes and ideas into something that really feels fresh and important, especially in this day and age. It's a movie with a concept that had a lot of potential and followed through on it. I'm already making plans to give it its own dedicated video for Christmas this year because I have much more to say about Spirited than I could here. It really captured my heart this holiday season, and I plan to make it a part of my Christmas viewing from now on. I will also never hear the phrase "good afternoon" the same way ever again.
Good afternoon! Good afternoon!
Good afternoon!
Number 6. Better Call Saul, Season 6. I just noticed what I did there. That's funny. Better Call Saul had a taller order to fill than most final seasons. Anyone will tell you that the toughest thing about telling a prequel story is that the very concept almost immediately destroys any tension. We know that certain characters are going to be okay because they need to stick around for the original story. Now, Better Call Saul has done a pretty good job at keeping the stakes high in spite of being Breaking Bad's predecessor through its brilliant writing and direction, but as the final season catches up to the events of Breaking Bad and even moves beyond the original show's timeline, that safety net is slowly taken away, and the anticipation to find out where this is all gonna go gets higher and higher. To say things were deeply uncertain for Saul and the rest of the characters going into this final season would be an understatement. I had a short list of who I thought was going to make it out of this season alive, and it was indeed a short list. It makes you stew in that dread, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but in a good way. Conveyed with masterful editing, cinematography, and performances, the final season has a lot of what's made this show great all along, where you fear for these characters you've grown to love every single second, battling internally between if that love should ensure their safety, or if they deserve some kind of comeuppance. And that's insanely impressive for a prequel. Once again, I won't be specific about how the show ends, but I will say it was immensely satisfying for me. It went the direction I hoped it would, even if I did not expect it to go there in the slightest. I may not be into Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul, through most of its run, had me glued to the screen with each passing scene. Well, except for a lot of the cartel stuff. Ironically, the show made me realize how much I would not enjoy Breaking Bad. But I'm glad that in spite of that, I gave this show a shot, because wow, what an experience it was. It's some of the best material on television this year, and I'm deeply going to miss it. One final note, how did this show not get a single Golden Globe or Emmy win through its entire run? Come on! Number 5. Moon Knight. This year was an interesting one for the Disney Plus side of the MCU, I'd say. Where last year all the shows starred pre-existing side characters, this time all of the Disney Plus shows focused on brand new heroes. They all have their pros and cons, and I could see any show Marvel made this year being on someone's favorites list, but keeping up my Marvel policy from last year's list, I can only pick one, and I had to give that spot to Moon Knight. It just checked a lot of the boxes for things I find personally appealing in my escapist fiction. A global, life-threatening treasure hunt, non-linear storytelling, pseudo-ancient Egyptian mysticism, a lead with unresolved trauma resulting in completely gut-wrenching personal revelations so devastating that they give Wanda Maximoff a run for her money, and on a more vain level, that costume is freaking cool. I didn't really know what to expect going into Moon Knight, apart from the fact that it looked cool. What I didn't expect was one of the most raw and brutal stories the MCU has told so far. It's dark and it's deep, full of twists and turns, sprinkled with typical Marvel action, which is awesome, burdened by our protagonist and his struggle with his own identity and mental health. It's great stuff, and the cast is really selling it. Like, holy crap, why was Oscar Isaac not nominated for all the awards like Elizabeth Olsen was? Maybe it has something to do with that British accent he pulls, because
my body wants to get up and wander about. You know, like it has to get the 10,000 steps in.
Oof. Like, I know it sounds like that for a reason, but it takes some getting used to. If I did have to criticize the show, I'd say the final episode falls a little flat. I never really felt the complaint about every Marvel movie ending with a big battle fizzling out the story until this show. I totally get it now, this one was really distracting and silly. But aside from that, I loved Moon Knight. This show has officially made me a fan of the character, and it did the best thing an adaptation can do. It makes me curious to check out the comics. Have I yet? No, but I will. I need something to fill the crescent moon-shaped hole in my heart until season 2 of the show that they haven't announced yet but better soon, because oh my god, that cliffhanger comes out. Number 4. Doctor Who, The Power of the Doctor. Every year comes with stories that have reached their end. Among the ones in 2022 was the end of an era in a series I'm very fond of. The final episode of the 13th Doctor's era in Doctor Who. To say Jodie Whittaker's time as the Doctor was filled with divisive commentary would be putting it mildly. Some justify criticism, but most of it not. But Chris Chibnall decided his era was going to go out with a big old wish fulfillment episode. A lot of things people have wanted to see more of in New Who are present here. Past companions, past doctors, the Master mastering it up, you name it, this special has likely got it. If you're a longtime fan of the show, it's likely going to make you really excited and very emotional. The only downside is due to what happens in the story, it feels like Jodie Whittaker gets pushed to the side in her own farewell episode. Is this a big problem? Yes, but they give her ample time to say goodbye, and when she does, it's some of the most emotional and well-performed moments of her entire run, through the fun, the frights, and the feels. In a way, The Power of the Doctor is all about helping the audience let go and move on, by reminding us that we've done it before. Even if you started the show with Whittaker's run, which a lot of people did, the torch has been passed time and time again. Bringing in new faces and saying goodbye to the old is a fundamental part of Doctor Who's longevity. It's gonna happen again, and it's gonna be okay. Every regeneration is someone's first, and I think it's essential for that farewell episode to not only be a good closing act for that Doctor, but to assure the audience that things will be alright, and this will still be Doctor Who, no matter what changes. Despite what flaws it may have, I'd say The Power of the Doctor may do this the best out of any of the regeneration episodes, although Matt's is a close second. I realized later on that this special came out around the time I had been a Doctor Who fan for 10 years. And so far, even if Jodie's run wasn't my favorite, this was the most emotional I've gotten at the end of a Doctor's run. Between all the reunions and farewells, I think I cried 4 separate times. Maybe 5. Which, by the way, is what ranks the special so high on the list. The Power of the Doctor was a wonderful end to the Chibnall era, a pretty good lead-in to the upcoming 60th anniversary celebration, and everything that makes Doctor Who sad, wonderful, unique, and a little convoluted, but in a good way, distilled into 87 minutes. Goodbye, Jodie Whittaker. Thank you for a brilliant run. Number 3. Black Panther. Wakanda Forever. My Doctor Strange loving heart wanted to put Multiverse of Madness on this list, it really did, but when you walk out of a theater, wiping the tears from your eyes after finishing a film, you have to give it the place of honor. This was a tough movie to go into for everyone. For the audience, and I'm sure for the people who made it. I can't think of another blockbuster franchise that was put in this position, having to work around the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, their title hero, one who was such a landmark in the cinematic universe and very important to those who wanted to see superheroes who looked like them on screen. After appropriately mourning a real-world loss, there were a lot of reactions on what should be done about Black Panther. There were a lot of strong feelings about where things should go after such a tragedy, and in a brilliant move, that's kind of what this movie's about. What happens when the symbol of your nation and its #1 protector is suddenly gone? When people have to step up to positions of power and influence while mourning the loss of a loved one, after already coping with so much tragedy and change beforehand? And most of all, what kind of future are you going to mold with what they left behind? I'll save a more detailed look for when I catch up onto Infinity War and Beyond and eventually review this movie properly, but I think it's safe to assume that this was the hardest movie to make in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, and probably ever will be. But with its very strong script, Ryan Coogler's impeccable direction, the integration of new and anticipated characters, and the now ensemble cast rising to the occasion magnificently, this entire team came together and delivered a respectful next chapter in the saga that rocks you to the core emotionally. A memorial for the hero and great actor we lost, a celebration of the legacy he built, and the cast and crew who will keep it alive after he's gone. Even if the original Black Panther is no longer here, the legacy he built in the series is in good hands. In the words of the hero himself, Wakanda forever! Number 2. Stranger Things, Season 4. This was probably the big event of the year TV-wise. You might remember when the pandemic hit back in 2020, movies and shows were getting delayed left and right. And I'd say Stranger Things was one of the most significant casualties of that wait. They had already started releasing the teasers, then suddenly, bam! Sorry, gonna have to wait for this. How long? Heck if we know. Hope these kids don't get too tall in the meantime. But this is definitely one of those cases where the wait was 100% worth it. This is the biggest season of Stranger Things in terms of scope, length, and production quality, but it always stays connected to this ragtag group of characters we've grown to love so much. Juggling several plot lines like previous seasons, but with a much larger scale, the precision to do that well was key. And even after the hiatus, the Duffer Brothers and their team thankfully haven't lost their touch. The visuals are absolutely stunning, particularly during the scenes in the Upside Down. The horror is the most disturbing it's gotten in the series so far. Vecna is an incredible and terrifying villain. The performances from the kids are perhaps the best they've ever delivered, and that's really saying something. Joseph Quinn as Eddie Munson was quite possibly the big breakout star of 2022, and it answers a lot of questions we've had since the beginning of the series, but raises a few more. It's a story that, if done incorrectly, could have come off as too much spectacle, not enough substance, or went too far into the backstory for a series that I don't think ever really needed it. Trust me, I've been down this road before. But as the story played out, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, dying to see what would happen next, and if everyone would make it back to each other okay. Don't get me wrong though, it ain't perfect. Unless it's Mike and Eleven, and maybe Will, I still do not care in the slightest about the romance subplots in the show, and please, for all that is good and right in this world, don't ask Argyle back for season 5. But to be perfectly frank, this is probably the season of Stranger Things I have the least complaints about. It managed to be huge and world-shattering with insanely long episodes near the end, but it didn't get swallowed up in its own ambition. Everything is so well thought out and focused and serves something to either further the story or enhance the characters, through success and failure. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little meh on season 3. Like, I didn't hate it, it was good, but I don't think it was as good as the previous 2 seasons. So I was, admittedly, a little concerned when the build-up to season 4 began. But this was the highest peak Stranger Things has reached yet. It was phenomenal. I don't know how they're gonna wrap all this up in the 5th and final season, but after this, I have every confidence they'll go out with a bang. Before we get to number 1, let's go over a few quick honorable mentions. The second season of Only Murders in the Building only barely got cut from the list. It builds on what was set up in season 1 to create another big, elaborate mystery with twists and turns aplenty that always kept me guessing. Coupled with some strong character drama and top-tier performances, this was a fantastic season and I am unbelievably excited to see what they come up with for season 3. Once again, Enola Holmes only makes it into the honorable mentions, but I did enjoy the sequel more than the first. It has a lot of the aspects that made the first movie charming, but sanded down the rougher edges. Mainly that Mycroft isn't in it. Like Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, I could watch Millie Bobby Brown as Sherlock's little sister for several more films. If you saw my review of the first season, you know I really enjoyed Ghosts, but I wasn't quite sure if I could put it on this list. I'm enjoying season 2 quite a bit, but it's not finished, so I'm giving it an honorable mention. If anything I talked about in my review of season 1 seemed appealing to you, season 2 is a lot of the same stuff with that extra push creatively and emotionally occasionally. I'm really loving it so far. On the subject of seasons that are tough to categorize, it cannot be understated how well the team behind the Owl House have managed to work with the limitation of only having 3 specials left to wrap up its story. The first special, thanks to them, is a true sign of what this team can accomplish despite the limitations they're under. With deeply human connections and searches for purpose in this series led by magic and mysticism. I'm very much anticipating how the show wraps up from here, and with any luck, it might make the list properly next year. And even though I haven't watched it yet because I'm waiting for the English dub, I have to mention that 2022 was the year the impossible happened, where Ash Ketchum became the world champion. Because, wow, as a lifelong Pokemon fan, that was pretty incredible. Alright, now on to the big one. And my number 1 favorite piece of entertainment from 2022 is... Okay, this is where I need to preface yet again that these are favorites lists, not best lists. I know this movie is not the best or most accomplished of the year, but in terms of which movie was going to be my favorite, if it was done well, there was only ever going to be one choice. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I recognize that this is probably not on any other list like this on this entire site, but I also recognize that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the most fun I had watching a movie this year. Possibly because I got to see it with my friend Sebastian from Cinemageddon Reviews when he was visiting, and that was pretty awesome. Especially since I don't get to see movies with friends that often. Anyway, I will race to defend the first Sonic movie. In fact, I did a lengthy review doing just that, but at the end of the day, I did think it was just okay. I even ended my review saying that I liked that movie more for the potential it had for sequels than I did as a movie on its own. I can safely say that this is the cinematic Sonic experience I've been waiting for. The seeds of potential planted in the first film's origin story has grown into a mighty oak of adventurous action set pieces, a well-realized supporting cast, a creative reinterpretation of the lore behind the Chaos Emeralds, and that sincerity and camaraderie that gives this series its heart, growing larger and stronger than ever. I love that Tails was a lonely little guy who idolizes Sonic and how sweetly their friendship builds. I love how Jim Carrey is at his Jim Carreyest now that Eggman has gone full manic obsessed supervillain. I love everything about Agent Stone. Please keep him around forever. I love the portrayal of Knuckles here, that he's honorable but naive, stubborn but dedicated, and how they lean into that grief around being the last of his kind. Easily the best version of the Echidna in a long time. I love the introduction of Gun and how they still make sure Tom and Maddie contribute. And I love seeing Sonic still struggle with his purpose, what he's supposed to do with his powers, and the responsibility he holds around something he still doesn't really understand. But he's trying to. This is where I really understood that primal excitement at seeing heroes you love brought to life in a whole new medium. As silly as it might sound to some of you, this was my Avengers. Seeing Team Sonic together on the big screen, racing to save the day, and having it done so well, fueled my brain with blue blur serotonin for at least a month. There were still things that got under my skin, the humor mainly, and how it can really pad out a scene, but for the most part, this is everything I was missing from the first movie. That potential has officially been unlocked, and judging by that end credit scene, you can bet I am unbelievably psyched to see where they take this movie franchise for the fastest thing alive next. But seriously, that end credit scene, it made me so happy. You can ask Sebastian, I screamed. And don't worry, this entry will also be getting a full review at some point. There's no way I'm not going to dedicate a video to this one, guys. I have so much more to say about Sonic 2 and what could come next, and have I mentioned how good it feels to see this much excitement around Sonic the Hedgehog? It's wonderful. There was a lot of that this year. 2022 was a really exciting year for Sonic, and this movie is a shining example of why. And that's what makes Sonic the Hedgehog 2 my favorite piece of entertainment of 2022. Don't judge me. Do you agree with my list? Probably not, it's very weird, I know. But in that case, let me know what some of your favorite entertainment was this year and why. That's what the comments are for. Now it's time to sit back and see what awaits our screens in 2023. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like I said, definitely let me know what some of your favorite entertainment was in 2022 in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including David L. Sproul, Chelsea A. Crandall, Hawk Hero, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.